Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that gives you a peek inside the minds of some truly inspirational teachers. This week, I'm thrilled to welcome Adam Smith onto the podcast to talk about all things religious education. Since we recorded this episode back in February half-term 2021, Adam has gone on to create the sensational Powerful Curriculum podcast, and I highly recommend you make a visit there once you've finished up here. Without further ado, let's spend some time thinking deeply about primary religious education.
Cool. So we always start with our guests in numbers, and so the rules generally are, you can only answer numbers. Not that everyone sticks to those rules much.
No.
And so my first question is years as a teacher.
4 years. 4 years as a teacher now.
Last year group taught?
Year 6. I'm a year 6 teacher at the moment.
Most important year group?
What a horrible question. Basically, I decided on any transitional year group. So any year group moving from one key stage to another. So year 1, year 3, 6, 9, 11, 13, I guess, moving into key stage 6. I just think that those year groups are where you see a real shift in students. We were doing comparative judgment recently, looking at some science writing, and it's really, it was such an eye-opener for me as someone who's come to primary. We were judging pieces from year 1 all the way up to year 6, and I did them one after the other, going backwards in time from year 6 to year 1. And I just thought, oh my goodness, some of these teachers must be just miracle workers, because this is the end of the autumn term, and the gap between the year 1 piece and the year 2 piece, the year 2 piece and the year 3 piece is vast. And I think you especially see that around transition years. So you especially see that moving from reception into year 1. So I'm going to hedge my bets and say more or less every year group, but particularly transition year groups.
Nice. I think the teachers in transition year groups feel the intensity at the very start of the year, but as you say, once they get going, I think, the work they do there is so important. That's a really good answer. What's your favorite year group?
I'm going to go for a wild card here, and I'm going to say year 7, which is outside primary, obviously, but I love teaching year 7. They're so enthusiastic arriving at secondary school for the first time. Got to teach RE all day, which, I absolutely love being a primary teacher, but RE is obviously a huge passion for me. And it's kind of a bit of a fresh start. So you get a bit of a chance to lay some new foundational behavioural groundwork. You get the chance to introduce them to lots of new topics and introduce them to new disciplinary ways of working if you're just doing RE. And I've always sort of dreamt really of working in a middle school. So when I was growing up, we didn't go to high school until year 8. I went to a middle school, I think year 5, 6 and 7. And I was taught by specialist teachers, year 5, 6 and 7, in the same way that secondary schools are. And I feel really fortunate for that. It was a good stepping stone from primary to secondary. And so my dream job would be as an RE history, geography teacher, humanities teacher in a 5, 6 and 7 school. So yeah, I'm going to say year 7.
Nice. That sounds awesome. And I know whenever I talk to people like Christopher Such about a specialist model, he normally thinks, he says to me, that latter part of key stage 2 is where you can really get the benefit. And it sounds like your experience has sort of borne out things he's thinking about.
Yeah, when he was talking about it on the podcast, I was nodding along vigorously. Yes, I think we're really fortunate to have music, art, MFL. I even have someone in class who's a HLTA, who's a fantastic maths expert, who's been teaching with our maths scheme for many years, which I find incredibly valuable. And we're lucky to be more than one form entry. We're 3 form in year 6. So we have specialists who sort of specialize in English and maths in each year group. But I don't necessarily, I think there's such a huge gap between year 6 and year 7. That transition is vast, that actually the middle school model with specialists bridges that gap, because you can have more of a class relationship. I think like Christopher was saying, you need to strike more of a balance in those upper key stage 2 year groups.
Blog posts?
I had to count them because I couldn't work out on WordPress, so I just sat there this morning 29 blog posts.
And blog hits?
47,000, which surprised me. I don't know where they all come from, because I log on and I'm like, ooh, wow, 80 hits, that's amazing. But yeah, apparently over 2 years, 47,000. So that was good.
That is really impressive, and but I think it shows the quality of those blog posts as well. Because I'm like, even though RE is nothing to do with my job per se, I'll still read them, and I'll definitely put them in the show notes, and so the other people.
That's nice, thank you. I'm going to go down a more BuzzFeed route next year. I'm aiming for 100,000, so I'm thinking, like listicles and clickbait and things like that. You will not believe what this one easy trick to fix RE in your school. So.
And this was the last question everyone gets asked: tweets.
I don't feel as ashamed about this as other people. But 8,295. That's okay. I won't tell you how many on the other Twitter account I've had since 2008, but teacher Twitter, 8,295. So
nice, yeah, because we always talk about this, and people think I've tweeted lots, I've tweeted not so much. I don't really know what a normal amount of tweets is, because I'm sure there's some. Like
it'd be good to get some data on that, wouldn't it, to make sure that you're not absurdly abnormal in the amount that you tweet. Be good to know what the median is.
Yeah. I think I'm reaching 4,000 soon, but it's I reckon I'm definitely on the low end, and only tweeting more than once a day recently.
Yeah, you need to up it. I mean, I'm desperate to know what you've had for lunch today, and like if you go by my model, I tweeted a very popular tweet earlier about my circumnavigation of Canvey Island over half term. This is the kind of content people crave, so you just got to get on that.
Excellent. So you're a Year 6 teacher, RE lead, and executive for the National Association of Teachers of Religious Education. Tell us about your journey and how you got here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite an unusual journey. So I went back to university in my mid-20s. I got married in Freshers Week, actually, so it's all a very intense period of time. And I studied liberal arts, so a little bit of theology, a little bit of art history, a little bit of philosophy, or quite a lot of philosophy. And at no point during those 3 years, despite my sort of tutor's insistence, did I want to become a teacher. At no point really up until it wasn't an idea that really occurred to me. In fact, I went back to university because I thought that I might want to become a priest, not a teacher. And obviously things got in the way of that because I'm in a same-sex marriage, so I had to consider a different roadmap. And I was going into schools because when I was growing up, I was in foster care, in and out of care. So I was going into schools to run sort of aspirational assemblies from the university about going to university. I was also doing residentials with kids who were care experienced or in care at the university. And I did a lot of that in my third year, and got to the last term of my third year and suddenly thought, right, okay, well, I can do a master's, I can go down that route. And actually, I just decided I wanted to work. I wanted to have a career, as if it was 1955, those things that people apparently outside academia were able to have. And I looked at what I was qualified for, and I looked at what I was passionate about, and I ummed and ahed over primary and secondary. And I came down on the side of secondary because I was interested in the subject matter, specialisation, things like that. So I went off to Oxford to do a secondary PGC in religious education, and had a great time, enjoyed my year at Oxford, and thought PGC was fine, basically. And then I moved to Cambridgeshire, and I got a job as an RE teacher in a huge school, 2,500 students in a fairly ordinary town in Cambridgeshire. And it was fine. I mean, the school was nice. I had a very supportive head of department. I developed a sort of love for RE there, and I think that what we were doing there was pretty strong. I had I had a constant recurring existential crisis every month or two that I couldn't teach because behavior disruption, or I felt like I just didn't have the chops to do it. I wasn't built for it. I think a lot of NQTs and RQTs probably feel like that on occasion. And then, almost in the same way that someone knocks on your door and gives you the Book of Mormon, a member of the SLT there gave me Daisy Christodoulou's 7 Myths About Education, and another member of probably the same member of SLT gave me Barak Rosenstein's Principles of Instruction, and that was sort of my transformational moment. Really, that was when I realised I could improve like quickly, and I could improve practically, and I could improve material outcomes in my class and in my literally like in exam and assessment results by doing some really practical steps. Before that, I was very much like, I'm a reflective teacher, I'm going to take time and it's going to be slow. And I still believe that. But Rosenstein and Christodoulou and all the reading that came after that gave me, like Doug Lemov, for example, gave me a practical handbook for change. And then I felt that within that school, I kind of got as far as I had got in doing those practical changes. And I wanted a change of environment. I wanted to go to a school that kind of was based more fully on those principles. So I wanted to go and find a school. And actually, I think this is probably the first time I've ever said this, but it's long ago enough in the past now that I can kind of admit to it. But I went and interviewed at Michaela because I thought that's kind of where I wanted, because that was somewhere that I wanted to go. And I looked at other schools around London and the Southeast with similar ideas, and I interviewed at a few of them. At the same time, I left my job sort of handed in my notice at October, and it was December, and I'd put out on EduTwitter, I've thrown myself on the mercy of EduTwitter, desperate, maybe desperate, maybe not, but looking for something to do for 2 terms, because I thought by September, these jobs at Michaela and wherever else I was applying for, they're all September starts, and I thought I've got loads of time to explore and find out what I want to do. But I want these 2 months, think of it like a career break, and I can go do something weird and unusual. I thought I could go and do some curriculum work because that's where my interest has always been. I could go and do cover work in a school. I could go and maybe do 2 days a week here, 3 days a week there. So I put it out there. I was really shocked. I think Neil said this as well about his career, that the response was amazing. People, at the time I probably didn't have more than 1,000 followers, but people were like offering me bits and bobs and saying, come and visit and talk to me and blah, blah, blah. And all this time has always been secondary. I'd never really considered primary since I started my PGC. And then my current head teacher messaged me on Twitter and was like, this is our school. I'd like to have you come in and talk to us and have a look around the school. I think you'd really enjoy it. And I replied, very politely, thank you so much. Mostly I would reply, I'll take a look. Yeah, great, fantastic. Let me get back to you. I was like, no, thank you so much for the offer, but I'm not a primary teacher. I don't see myself in primary. I'm not naturally, I don't naturally see myself as a primary teacher. And she, fortunately for me, was persistent. So she messaged me again, probably about a week later, and said, look, okay, I think you'll love it. Here's what we've done. Actually, we just been Ofsteded under the new framework, and we came out outstanding. And here's the Ofsted report, and here's our curriculum, and here's what we're working on. And we want you to come and, we feel like we've got everything in place for the other subjects we're working. We've got a clear progression for what we want to do there. But RE, it's not looking great. And I replied again saying thank you. She was like, let me call you. And I remember standing out on the bus bays after school in December. It was probably dark by then, it was about 4:30. And the last bus sort of left, and she rang me. And it was a real kind of moment of revelation, because I kind of, in that moment, I like opened myself up to the idea that I could work in primary. Even if it was just for 2 terms. So I went down to London and I had an interview, and I did an interview lesson where I was so excited and happy to be teaching children who were enthusiastic in year 3. And it was, such a, that I forgot to do the written task. It was just me talking about light in RE for like 45 minutes or something stupid. And then we had a really great conversation about like what my role could be at the school. And that was all December 2019. Well, it feels like longer away. And I started there in January 2020. Ominous soundtrack begins. And throughout my time, so I did cover work for the next 3 months. I worked on the RE curriculum. I ended up teaching quite a lot of cover, which I just loved. I had the opportunity to go into classrooms from year 1 to 6. All of the planning had been done for me. I was just picking up teachers' work. It was absolutely brilliant. So I loved doing that. I absolutely loved it. And then, of course, March happened. I was looking because it was just before World Book Day. So all these bizarre photos of us dressed up for fun having World Book Day. And little did we know what was just coming around the corner. In fact, I particularly remember World Book Day because it was pouring it down with rain and we had a fire alarm go off. And I remember these poor 5 and 6 year olds dressed as fairies and dressed as characters from books, just drenched and shivering in the rain, standing outside in Southwark. That was that was interesting to see. I think you really see a school come together when when you're suddenly standing in a car park trying to organize everyone. So that was good. And then the school, just like that, came up with the most incredible virtual school. I was part of some of the meetings, but not all of them. And wow, just seeing the school whir into action over the virtual school and building it made me realize what I already knew, but confirmed for me that this was an incredibly special school full of the most amazing teachers and leaders. And like, I'd be stupid to I was so happy. And I was going to leave at the end of the summer term. Why would I do that? Unfortunately, just before we locked down, a class teacher role came up, which is quite rare. I gather in a lot of primary schools. It's not like secondary schools where there's lots of roles coming up. And I popped my head around the head teacher's door and I was like, I'm just to let you know, I'm thinking of applying, thinking she'd be like, whoa, we thought you were going back to secondary. But she was like, yeah, I know you're going to apply because you're happy. And she could see like the transformation that I'd been through in just those 3 months. And she says to me now, like, I can see that you're a different person from who you are when you first started with us. And that's very true. So I took the role and I became a permanent member of staff. And in September, I got a year 6 class who I just love teaching year 6, absolutely love it to bits. I've worked on the RE curriculum there, which obviously we'll talk about a little bit later. I guess I'm a primary school teacher now. I mean, you can tell, look at the jazzy shirt. This was a post-secondary purchase. If you look behind me in my wardrobe, you'll see there's a selection of jazzy shirts and plain shirts. And that really marks my transition from secondary to primary.
Excellent. That's some sequence of events. I think, particularly in terms of, a role coming up at the time it did, because from what I can see, a lot of people are sort of almost staying in their positions or in their roles because of the uncertainty of the world around. So that's really fortunate and fantastic to hear that you're so enjoying primary so much. But what, imagine being those 2 books, you couldn't have been handed 2 better books for your professional development, because 7 Myths hasn't come up yet. But I know a lot of teachers can relate to the impact it has, because I often we talk about the thunderbolt. It was a thunderbolt for the whole profession, I think, really.
It was a real thunderbolt because up until that point, all of the education books that I'd read already agreed with everything that I believed. So I went into teaching super prog, loved Paulo Freire, thought that was the bee's knees. I remember having arguments in my PGC when we were reading research. I was like, you can't do research into education. It's all about, it's all about feeling, and it's all about like, this is immoral to try and do scientific research into education. It just doesn't work. And I was like, it's good that you can see the most reflective thing you can do is look back on yourself and cringe, isn't it? I mean, that's reflective. So when I read Daisy Christodoulou, I initially came at it with quite a lot of hostility. And then I was like, I got to like Myth 7 and I was like, okay, well, what's the credentials of this person? And looked in the bibliography and looked at all that. And I was like, oh my Lord. And then that really started a very swift transition, really. Thunderbolt is right. I mean, it wasn't a gentle shower. It was swift. And Twitter, that was probably when I got my Twitter account about then. I remember, this is probably not great, but I remember unfollowing certain people at the time because I just thought, like, actually, no, I'm changing the kind of teacher that I am. It was a bit of an unusual time to go into it feeling like, the learning period is done. I've done my PGCE, got 2 massive lever arch folders that show that I'm like qualified and know what I'm talking about. I'm ready. And then in your first year of teaching, for you to have everything absolutely turned upside down is quite dramatic. and possibly that was like the flapping of the butterfly's wings that led to me, being where I am now.
Yeah, it's fascinating because at the minute I'm trying to work out whether or not we need to go through that period. If it's something, because it happens. I don't think I've met anyone who hasn't explained it in similar terms of thinking so much and then realizing how little you know. And I'm trying to find if anyone's done any background research into whether or not it is a necessary sort of not rite of passage, but a part of the development process. And
it's but then that implies there's always going to be, I want to put this in the most polite way possible, but there's always going to be a lost period of every teacher's career. And for some people who've come on your podcast, that's been, in my case, maybe a couple of months into my NQT, but for other people that was a lot longer period. I think there's obviously value in what happens in that period. That's not dismissing that, but is there a way that we can do ITT that misses that period? But then it's like what I thought Neil talking about when he went to that school, the ARC school, and they put Doug Limov in front of him, and it didn't work for him. So is that what would happen in ITT if we were giving that straight up? I mean, I guess that's where something like Teach First comes in, because they've got a completely different model of what's important in their PGs and their ITT program.
Yeah, and I definitely don't know the answer. It's just something I found really interesting. I think the Ambition Institute, they seem to be exploring that early teacher development process, and they seem to have their priorities in order in terms of how teachers grow. So it could be that we find out an answer to that, sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I agree with that.
You're extremely passionate about high quality religious education in primary. Why is RE essential at our phase of schooling?
This is another moment that is, I'd love to come on the podcast and be like, yeah, it's because of this and this and this and this. It's all really clear, but it's always constantly filled with self-doubt when I think about the importance of RE, because you're constantly coming up with meeting people who just don't share the same importance that you do. I mean, I mentioned earlier that I want to be a priest. I'm practicing Anglican, Anglo-Catholic Christian. So for me, there's an inherent importance in RE because a lot of my non-teacher life is quite heavily focused on practicing religion, and and I feel quite heavily bathed in religious culture and things like that, and I can see the benefit that it has for me in that. But then I have to separate that because that's all about my personal experience. That's all about having religious belief, and I'm very sure that RE is just as important for people with no religious belief whatsoever, because and that's where I have to, that's the starting point I have to go from. I can't start from a point of it's obviously important to people with religious belief, but here's trying to work backwards and understand why it's important to everyone. So I put that completely aside and I think about, well, what is it that they actually learn in RE? I mean, there's all the stuff that you hear, and any RE, anyone who suddenly had Ofsted knocking on their door could say about RE. It's about social cohesion, it's about making kids understanding of others, it's about improving our society, and that's all very lofty. And I think those are good side effects of good RE, but it's not, for me, that's a very, very finicky thing to go and say that that's what our RE program is leading up to. And I think that you can also get down the route where you start to, how to put this? I want to use the word castrate. I'm going to use the word castrate. You start to castrate religion. So you start to turn it into something that is very like touchy-feely and cotton wool, and all elements of religion are good. And I don't think that's necessarily helpful. Instead, I like to look at religion through RE through some different lenses, and one of those lenses that's really important to me is about religious and cultural literacy. So I really believe E.D. Hirsch when he talks about cultural literacy and being able to interact with the world in a mature way. I also think that having a certain level of cultural literacy or understanding of almost like a national or an international culture, that helps children to access further learning as well. And that's really crucially important. RE is a foundation to being able to access other subjects. You won't find RE in most universities. You won't find a section in Waterstones labeled RE because it's not like history or geography or music. It doesn't have an academic foundation like that. It's a multidisciplinary subject. And by offering and delivering high quality religious education, what we're doing is we're giving students the tools to be able to access and have a deep understanding of a huge range of different academic disciplines, both in primary, secondary, tertiary education, and in their adult life. I think you couldn't, I mean, not to pick like cliched high culture examples, but you couldn't get everything out of Dostoevsky unless you had some understanding of the Bible. You couldn't get everything out of, even like fantasy novels that I love reading are improved because you see the parallels with Islam or Christianity or different religious ideas. The fantasy novel that I'm reading at the moment, Robert Jordan, brings in bits of Buddhism, bits of Christianity, Hinduism, Judaism. And I mean, that's one thing, but that's only a tiny part of it. And then you go to the National Gallery, and then you watch a film, and then you interact with history in any form over the whole of human existence, and an understanding of basic religious concepts helps there. And then all that other stuff, it helps our students discover who they are. That's great, and that's secondary to the primary focus for me, which is RE is a right down at the bottom foundational building block for understanding local culture, British culture, European culture, worldwide culture. That's what it is for me. That's not the clearest explanation I've ever given, and it went in about 25 different directions. But probably that shows off a little bit of the passion that I have about it. That I can't quite focus my mind on an easy, simple answer to that question.
I think you've probably got the hardest one, because I've asked everyone that question on this season, but because of the emotion and the history of that everyone comes to our religion with, I think it's the hardest one to answer, like you say, objectively. I think you've done a really good job, because the way I interpret religion is it's how peoples have made sense of the world and the universe over millennia, and so it feels like you say, that makes it the basis, because almost a lot of all the rest of the stuff that we do, once we feel we understand where we are, in this in this world, then that's where the decisions come from. So I think you're spot on. I'm actually reading Dostoevsky at the moment. I think three pages at a time of Crime and Punishment. I've tried.
We're actually teaching Crime and Punishment to Year 6 at the moment. We've just had them write persuasive paragraphs to Raskolnikov about whether he should kill the evil landlady or not. So that's been really fun. Surprising number of Year 6s are incredibly moral. I really thought we were going to have a lot more murderers on our hands, but I was taken aback reading 60 responses, and they were all, "Don't murder them."
I suppose that's a relief. Do you think anyone at your school will blog about that experience? That sounds really interesting.
Well, we've got the English coordinator in Year 6 is absolutely incredible, and this is by far the thing that I look forward to most in the year, is teaching Crime and Punishment. We don't use the original text, although I'm reading the original text at the moment, obviously, because it's Year 6. But we do use a nice version of it that's really well written, and we combine it with a really rigorous topic in geography that looks at Russia, but also Russian history and things like that. So so it's really well thought out, and it's got a good place in our curriculum. It's good.
Nice. Yeah, it would be your class novel for about 7 years if you.
Yeah. Okay, so we start reading Crime and Punishment in Year 1, and then we finish in Year 6, and that's our entire English curriculum.
Yeah, because like I said, I have to break it down into around, okay, if you read 3 pages, that's a success, and then you build, and you always read more. I remember feeling when I was about 20, 22, and now I've gone back and thought, at this time, I'm going to finish this book.
Yeah.
Because it is wonderful. It just takes effort, doesn't it? And if you had to condense your approach to the teaching of RE into a set of guiding principles, what would they be?
Okay, and I thought about this a little bit. So I thought 3 principles. Principle 1, RE is not special. Okay, you might not expect me to say that. RE has let me be opinionated. Let me step back from, objective. Let me just give my opinion. I think RE has a stupid place in the curriculum. I think that it should be on the national curriculum. the way it works is that, our schools are obligated to teach some form of RE. Every single state maintained school in the country has some obligation to teach it. And then after that, you need a flowchart, a literal flowchart, to understand, based on the funding of your school, the type of school you are, the faith nature of your school, what kind of curriculum you have to follow: academy, free school, foundation school, voluntary aided school, faith school. And then after that, if you are someone who has to follow a locally agreed syllabus, you then have to find that syllabus, which varies wildly in quality and quantity and resourcing from, I've never understood why it's done by, I guess I do understand why it's done by local authority area, but Southwark is different to Lambeth, is different to Newham, is different to Barnet, Burnley is different to Blackburn, so there's so much duplicated effort going on there. And then you have to follow it, or you don't if you're in an academy or a free school, or a faith school. And history is just like, you just follow the national curriculum, and that you can talk to other history teachers, other history leads around the country about doing the Romans or doing African kingdoms or whatever it is. RE is so varied and so disparate and so nebulous. I find that really frustrating. So my sort of number one is it's stupid, and part of that would be to keep it simple and keep it focused. So keep it focused on three disciplinary lenses, which have come out of the Norfolk locally agreed syllabus and the book Making Every RE Lesson Count, which is theological, philosophical, and social sciences, or I call it cultural historical. So keep it focused on those three things. Make sure everything in your curriculum falls under one of those lenses. Make sure it's justified. Make sure it covers, again, controversial opinion, but I think 6 religions is fine. And actually in our curriculum, we specialize in Islam and Christianity and do introductions to the other 4 major religions, which are Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, and Judaism. There are people out there who want to do Zoroastrianism, want to do Baha'i, and that's great. Non-religious worldviews, I think, are worthy of inclusion now, but that basically just means atheism and humanism, which, the extent to which you can really study those as phenomena is very debated. Keep it simple, keep it focused, which is what I'm not doing with this explanation. I'm not keeping it simple and focused. So good note to myself, keep it simple and keep it focused. I guess the next point was make sure it's RE, because a lot of citizenship, RE is like a gas, right? RE will fill any gap that you have in your curriculum. Any Ofsted report that I've seen that comes back saying SMSC at this school could be improved, the first email goes to the lead head of RE. And that's wrong. That is a cross-curricular responsibility. PHSE is its own subject. Citizenship is its own subject. If you are head of leading RE, you need to know what RE is, and you need to make sure that you maintain those boundaries. What's that Roman tortoise formation that every year 3 learns and then makes a little cardboard model of? They need to test or something. They need to do that, right? They need to do that around their subject and be really clear that, no, I'm sorry, we can't teach inspirational women figures unless it's really clearly linked to religion, philosophy, so theology, philosophy, or social historical elements of religion, right? Just, you have to learn to say no. And that comes when you're reviewing your own curriculum. You need to have people that you can say, oh, this is actually more part of our PHSE curriculum, or this is more part of our pastoral curriculum. And then the third thing is to make it rich and beautiful. I feel incredibly passionate about making RE rich and beautiful. I mean by rich, I always use this phrase, knowledge rich, but not knowledge heavy. Or it can be knowledge heavy, but the focus should be on the richness of the knowledge. Knowledge heavy is just being able to recite a list of keywords or dates and things like that, and there's nothing wrong with that, and it's very important in many primary stages that kids know dates and kids know names and keywords. Richness is more about understanding concepts in religion and being able to apply those across different religions and across different areas of those 3 lenses. And then culturally rich and beautiful, I don't shy away from that word beautiful. I know everyone has different conceptions of beauty, but making the curriculum beautiful is crucial, whether that is in resource design, but particularly in using art and art history and architecture. So my RE curriculum is jammed full of like architectural tidbits and Renaissance paintings and Aboriginal art and Ethiopian icons and things like that, because I wrote a blog post a while ago about how I was using the most hideously illustrated cartoon of Isaac and Abraham and Isaac in year 7. And then I stepped back and I was like, well, Caravaggio, who's like my favorite artist, did this incredible painting. And I got a high res version of that. And I stood on the board, zooming in and looking at all the different parts of it. And that is a rich lesson. And students go away with that. I think it makes better connections to their long-term memory, and it improves their cultural literacy and all that. Whereas the cartoon lesson is quite an easy lesson, because you just play a cartoon and then you ask some comprehension activities about it, and they'll know about the story of Isaac and Abraham, but they won't get those side effects. So those are my 3 things. Keep it simple and focused, make sure it's RE, and make it rich and beautiful.
Nice. Never apologize for going off, because your passion's coming through, and I think people will find it really interesting. So don't worry about that one bit. And it's really interesting you say about making sure it's RE, because that's exactly what Victoria and Neil said about history and geography. So it seems like that's a thing that that might permeate the foundation curriculum, and to an extent the core subjects too. Yeah. And what would your advice be to anyone who is tasked with exploring the themes and the ideas that they want to teach across primary, and making that distinction between, say, for instance, citizenship and actual religious education?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is, if you are keen on teaching this kind of brand of religion, because I'm not coming on as, I'm coming on as a partisan in a way. This is my idea of religious education, right? There are people out there who completely disagree with me on this. So maybe I should have said that right at the start, but I'm quite opinionated, I'm quite partisan. I'm not trying to present this as the only idea of primary RE. And this is where I'm coming from. So if you are interested in this brand of knowledge-rich, culturally rich RE that has really clear disciplinary boundaries, it's okay to start from scratch. It's okay to have conversations about whether your school needs to separate out RE and everything else. So maybe your school doesn't have a PHSE and citizenship lead. Maybe I'm actually quite radical in this, that I would say it's worth giving up curriculum time as an RE lead to make sure that your subject is pretty disciplinarily disciplined, I guess. It's worth giving up half an hour and having half an hour lessons of RE and half an hour lessons of citizenship and PHSE, right? I'm totally up for that. It's worth maybe even having RE taught every other half term, if then there's going to be a clear strand of PHSE, citizenship, whatever else you want to call it, being aware of the world around you, politics, all of that can go into a different thing. Because otherwise, like I say, it's just this gas, and it will just expand. And as it expands, it loses its denseness and richness. It loses its identity. And then you really struggle to claw it back. So my advice is just be super clear about what you think religious education is. If you disagree with me, that's fine. But just be clear about how and why you disagree, and have a clear idea. Because my impression is, and it's not anyone's fault, but that RE is probably, being an RE lead is probably, you would dread a deep dive more than most, because I think some of those questions that Ofsted would ask appear on the surface to be really hard to answer for RE, but shouldn't be. They shouldn't be. I think you should be able to clearly, although I'm contradicting myself here because I've already said I'm not particularly clear at this, but you should be able to have at least quite a rigorous conversation with someone around the kind of questions that an Ofsted inspector would ask in a deep dive, about the purpose of RE and the intent and the implementation and all of that jazz.
Nice. The cultural markers you mentioned as well, I think I've come to realize them the older I've gotten, and there's absolutely no way I can remember if I wasn't introduced to them during primary school. But I think if I was envisaging the RE curriculum and I had some sort of responsibility, I think I find a lot of value in that too, because it is so prevalent. And like you say, Caravaggio's representation, the House of Athens. I'm not sure it's necessarily religious painting, but it's something along those lines. We've got key historical figures, and how their relationship with the world.
I'm really keen that all students are equipped to be like autodidacts. So that was quite a big deal for me. I went to school in the late 90s, early noughties, and I was in care, and I think I had a lot of leeway at school where I wasn't certainly didn't achieve to my academic potential. It was only after kind of leaving school and flunking out of university for the first time that I decided I was going to go down this autodidact route. And I remember literally being probably 19 or 20 and thinking, oh my God, sweet Lord, where do I even start? I know nothing about art, nothing about architecture, nothing about classical music, all these kind of, like, as you say, indicators or signifiers, but also I didn't know anything about, I just had no knowledge. And I set out, and I remember literally almost doing like rote learning of, like, these are the different styles of architecture, these are the different birds that you would see in a garden or by the seashore, these are what wildflowers are, these are, like, giving myself a proper little Enid Blyton 1950s education of what I imagined a culturally rich person would have. I mean, obviously that's deeply problematic when you actually dig down into the kind of things that at 19 I thought were really important. Like, why did I think that reading the Iliad was more important than reading the Bhagavad Gita? I don't know. It's because of this, that, and the other. And we, luckily, as teachers, can put a lot more thought and care and preparation into what we consider to be curricularly, yeah, why not? Let's go with curricularly worthy material. But by giving students that foundational knowledge of different religions and different philosophies of the world and different kind of like ways in which religion is sociologically important, then we can give them the base. I always think, like, talk about takeaways. Maya talks about takeaways, not Chinese or Thai, but curriculum takeaways. What do we want students to take away at the end of year 6? For me, I want them to be in a position that if they never did RE again, they went to a school, and they do exist, where RE isn't on the curriculum, illegal, but they exist, then they'd be okay. Then they'd have that foundation to go and find out more about religion when they leave school. They'd have that foundation. So that's kind of a way that I judge myself a little bit.
Excellent. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think there'll be lots of people listening. Like I say, you don't have to be of the exact same mind, but I think you're really clear in terms of these are your priorities. This is what should be guiding your decision making process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that'll be really useful. And then I suppose the next one's not an easy question. In your opinion, what's the single most important aspect of religious education?
I'm glad that you're asking me a difficult question, because I can say I've already answered it, because I've written down here: religious and cultural literacy, equipping students for future learning. And that's, I just can't get over that. I mean, I know that there are people probably screaming at their podcast saying, no, that's not what RE is about. I am a partisan. I have a clear vision in my head of what RE is about, and that's how I've encountered it. I'm obviously very open to, like, other people and listening to them, but maybe that's, I don't know whether that's a good thing or not. But for me, cultural and religious literacy is absolutely crucial. Future learning is absolutely crucial. And the way that RE informs and is informed by history, and to a lesser extent geography and English literature, is hugely important, and classics, if you study that. When I said that RE wasn't special, I think what I really want people to think of is, when people say humanities in primary, I want them to think history, geography, and RE. I don't want it to be in a special category with lots of pretty bows and tape wrapped around it and a big label on it that says, be careful, be delicate with it. I want people to go at RE with the same vigor that they go at history, thinking that there's a comparable level of, I can get to a point where I understand this well enough to teach this. I can feel confident about it. It's interesting. It's engaging. I don't necessarily always feel like people feel that way about RE, because people always have that deficit of understanding about it, which is not an answer to the question that you just asked. But I answered your question very quickly, and then I decided to answer my own question. So
That's absolutely fine. No, I think it's a constant source of worry for me, coming across as if I think I know everything. But the reason the podcast is called Thinking Deeply is because, at the very least, if we hear something we disagree with, then we're open to actually thinking a bit more about why we disagree. And actually, you alluded to it earlier on. We've all changed our minds, at least on one significant occasion in our careers, and I think that's the way I approach it, because you almost, if I qualified everything I said, then I would spend more time qualifying than asserting anything. Because I think in terms of maths, there are many conversations about which maths, what is the role of maths, but you almost have to come at it from your own experience and where you're coming from, and then I think trust the listeners to either, if they do disagree, at least the aim of this conversation is to think a bit more about the content.
You have to, something I learned about when I was reading philosophy in my final year, you have to plant your flag. You have to, there's a certain like arrogance that's required in order for you to plant your flag. So if you move up to even middle leadership, you need to be able to thoroughly and rigorously plant your flag in the ground and say, this is where I am right now. Now, having the ability to move that flag is also crucially important to any form of leadership, but having the ability to plant that in the first place is crucially important. Now, I'm not there with primary in general in terms of like teaching where I feel confident enough to plant that flag all over the shop, but I'm just about getting there with RE, where I now feel confident to plant that flag and say, this is what RE is, and this is for me, and this is, I think, what RE should be for other schools. Because when I was a philosophy student, I spent the last 2 years of my degree sort of saying, I don't really have an opinion on this, or like, just letting it wash over me in a way, and not trying to plant a stake and not saying I'm a this or I'm that. And that's where I was also for that period of time before I read Daisy Christodoulou. I was also very much like not taking a stance on any kind of pedagogical arguments or this, that, and the other. And recently I've felt it's quite important that teachers plant their flags, that teachers feel confident in what they're saying. Because, there are certainly people out there who will have done less reading or thought less strongly about things who will quite happily plant their flags. What probably a sign of being, as you say, thinking more deeply about things is a reluctance to do that. But then that means that it's that T.S. Eliot poem about the people who shout the loudest often have the least to say. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Yeah. My first book, I sort of did a lot of fence sitting. And then 4 years later in the second, it was like you say, it was a flag plant. And I feel much more satisfied with the end product. I'm happy with both of them, but in terms of as a representation of me and where I'm coming from it with maths education, that having, and I think it's through the product of talking to people and them sort of giving me the confidence to do that. So I totally see where you're coming from, and I think it is.
It certainly helps to feel like you're not alone where you are, where you've decided to plant that flag. I think that was one of the benefits of listening to the first series of this podcast for me, is that after doing that, I really felt like, like my understanding of primary was a lot deeper, but also that where I was starting to think about planting flags in primary, less because the curriculum side I feel pretty strong, confident about, but the pedagogical side and the pastoral side I'm still very much in the novice position about. And listening to that first podcast was like, oh, okay, well, that's reassuring to me that I'm not alone in feeling that, or that I'm not alone in feeling strongly about
that. That's awesome to hear. That's almost all the hours worth, mission accomplished kind of situation. Because like I said, it's really good fun talking to people, but they have so much to give as well. And so, we may possibly have covered this, but what is it that schools who provide a stellar religious education offering do so well?
I mean, we haven't. I think there was first thing I wrote was that there's a clear vision of the curriculum. I think we've covered that. The second thing was that it's sequenced in a really coherent way, and I'm just doing that now with next year's RE curriculum. We're moving from half-termly units to termly units, and I've now written all the units, so it's a matter of sequencing them, and I'm pretty excited about that because. I basically get to sit down with a load of post-it notes and make what's that? I think it's from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He's got the red string from every. That's going to be me with my curriculum map by the end of the spring term. So sequencing, and I mean you can go and read 100 billion blogs about how to properly sequence a curriculum. So many people have a clear idea about that. Rooted in the local community, I'm really keen that our whole curriculum is strongly linked to our local areas. Primary schools have the benefit of being hyper local, so a secondary school might cover an entire town or borough, half a borough, something like that. but primary school is hyperlocal. So you can really dig down into the kind of community that you're in and reflect that in your curriculum. For us, in my school, even though we're in an incredibly multicultural area in Southwark, we have a large Afro-Caribbean Christian population and a large Muslim population. So our curriculum reflects that with a focus on Islam and Christianity. I think if we were 3 miles further south, we might cover Hinduism in more depth. If we were 5 miles further north, we might cover Judaism in more depth. Also linking into the history of the local area. Well, that's across the curriculum, and I think one of the great things that a history curriculum has is a local study. And if I was in charge of writing the RE national curriculum, which I can only dream of existing, as we've discussed, I would include a local study in that as well. And we do that in our school. When we look at church architecture, we look at Southwark Cathedral, and we look at modern churches in South London. When we do Islamic architecture, we start by looking at the Bait al-Fuzul Mosque in Newington. So there's rooted in the local community is so crucial, and then connected with history and geography, not in a topic way. So not like, well, we're going to do the Romans, so we might as well do Roman religion as well, but in a meaningful way of are you going to teach the Reformation before you teach the Tudors, and before you teach the Tudors? Are you going to teach the idea of pantheism as a concept before you teach the Romans? Are you going to teach? I'm running out of examples now. There are links that you can make between those, and making sure that you've done one before the other, or you're doing both simultaneously, and that the links are meaningful and not what's the word I'm looking for? Tokenistic. So we're not just doing Hinduism here because we're going to do one Hindu story in English, for example. And then, knowledge rich but not knowledge heavy. And then I wrote down a quote here that I think exemplifies what I mean by knowledge rich and knowledge heavy. And it's from the History Boys, which is really, I love the History Boys. And it's Hector. And he gets furious when he's been told that the boys have been learning gobbets to use in their Oxbridge exams. Gobbets of little factoids that they can roll out to sound impressive. I think that's maybe some people's idea of what is meant by cultural capital in particular, is that we equip children with these gobbets. And he says he's furious that every answer will be hung like a Christmas tree with gobbets. And I just think that's what knowledge heavy means, and knowledge rich is all about fluency. And then I guess if I'm going to borrow a maths word, about mastery as well. Wow, I've never really thought about mastery in RE. There you go. There's a blog post coming soon to a blog near you.
Excellent. That's really clear. And actually, one of my questions was going to be about how you make that sequence. And I think the example you give is really powerful. Like you said, because the history curriculum and the RE curriculum, they have a lot in common. And I think that'd be a really enjoyable activity to do, would be to sit down with the history lead and talk about when is this most powerful to feature. And I think that's a really clear and really great example. And
I think that comes with seeing RE as a humanities subject. RE is a humanities subject as far as I'm concerned. Again, partisan taking a position. I know people disagree with me quite virulently on that, but for me, RE is a humanities subject.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and there are a lot of jigsaw pieces in my head, just sort of coming together. Having lived some of them, and even thinking about the differences in communities. And if I think about where I live and where I work, the sort of the identities of the towns are very, very different. And obviously, I've lived through and taught RE, but I'm putting it together with all the different ideas. It's making a whole lot of sense. So it is. And do you think that the schools who don't manage to give such a good offering, is it just the inverse, or is there any pitfalls they fall into that listeners should try and avoid?
Yeah, I think it's all about this, seeing RE as a special, delicate little baby that needs someone who knows everything about it in order to lead it confidently. That doesn't have right and wrong answers. If we're going to write AJ Smith's 7 educational myths about RE, that's myth number 1, that RE doesn't have right and wrong answers. That I think there's muddy water around the right to withdraw from RE. No other subject in the curriculum can parents write into schools and say, I don't want my child learning French, don't believe in French. And the fact that RE is seen as this special subject has, I think, led to that right to withdraw. That hasn't caught up with the fact that in most schools RE is a non-religious subject. It's not about religious instruction. It's not about even acts of collective worship, which are a million miles away from what RE should be in 2021. So yeah, not having it like that. I think also that this idea that it's too difficult, too sensitive to teach, you should be very wary of certain things, but then you should address that explicitly. So with year 2, I've just done an online course of 6 lessons on the Prophet Muhammad. Now, for me, as a Muslim, not as a Muslim, I don't choose to use the honorific "peace be upon him" in my slides or when I'm talking about it. But I know that one of the year 2 teachers is Muslim, and she chooses to use that when she's writing her description of it. But then we address that in lesson 1. We say, some Muslims use "peace be upon him" as an honorific because of this. Also, we're not going to be doing a storyboard activity. We're not even going to be like writing our own versions or putting ourselves into the shoes of Muhammad, because those would be disrespectful. And this is for these reasons. So you explicitly address the difficulty. You make clear to students what is respectful and disrespectful. And probably err slightly on the side of caution. Maybe there are more things we could do. I was pretty careful putting together this PowerPoint to not include any kind of representational images of people, let alone Muhammad. So it's just like a desert and a camel and stuff. And then there's even a winged character called Burak. And I was kind of searching around as to whether I could include a statue of him that is in Indonesia, whether that would be appropriate. And then I would be totally open to parents coming to me and saying, look, we felt that this was respectful, this was disrespectful. I'd also feel moderately confident to be able to rebut some things and defend the subject. And that position of confidence in it is important to good RE, to be able to defend your subject. You probably have to do a lot more than if you're head of maths. So not too sensitive. The other thing I wanted to mention as well, I think it came up on Twitter recently, was the idea of being over ambitious. So I think that a lot of RE is under ambitious, or not. Maybe that's unfair. Maybe not under ambitious, but just it doesn't realize its full potential, doesn't realize how far it can go. And so we do some pretty crazy stuff, like teaching year 4 about Aquinas and Augustine and conscience. And we do it in a really straightforward, step-by-step, rose and shine, breaking things down, making sure the understanding is there. That's fine. However, I think there's a tendency, and I absolutely know it and understand it because I've been there and I've done it, and perhaps this year 4 module is an example of it, to be over ambitious and to be like, yeah, well, in year 3 we can actually get them to understand these 400 different terms in Arabic, and they can match them up on a matching activity, and that proves that they've got this incredible understanding of RE. Just be patient. You as a primary school teacher, you take it all the way up to year 6 and you can start to do some pretty tricky, interesting stuff in year 6. I've got this idea about essentialism, diversity and dissent in terms of how we teach religion. And you can get all the way to that diversity. You can teach different denominations. You can look at the history of religion. But please leave some stuff for secondary school and A level, because you can get a kid to talk about you can get a kid in year 4 probably to maybe just about understand act and rule utilitarianism. I mean, I think I've just about done that, but they're not going to do it again until year 12, providing they do GCSE RE and A level RE. And arguably, I think most people can get to their deathbed without really needing to understand the finer points of act utilitarianism. Pains me to say that, but somehow people cope. I don't know how, but somehow they cope. So over ambition can be just as dangerous as under ambition, because then you get frustrated. You're like, last year I taught them, Hegel, and now they're in year 4 and they don't even remember it and they can't. So just stick to the basics. There's no shame in that. Religion is interesting enough. And you forget what kids don't know as well. You forget that kids in year 1 don't know what prayer is and have no concept, a lot of them, of God as a supernatural being. You can't just turn up and start talking about God. You really have to lay the basic foundations. So yeah, and I mean, I did put on my sheet here, I put worldviews ? There's a big discussion going on in RE at the moment about a name change to religion and worldviews. about what worldviews are, what it means. I mean, it's good to have that kind of like discussion. It's happened in history maybe like 10 years ago, but happening in RE now. I'm not a fan of worldviews. You can read a blog post on my blog about why I think worldviews are. Well, I think I ended it by saying something really stupid like either it's a well-meaning attempt that unfortunately opens the door up for a sort of like secularization of the subject and a slow dismantling of the subject, or it's all a grand conspiracy by secular forces to get rid of RE. Either way, I don't believe in them. I don't believe in them. I do believe in them. I believe they exist. I believe they're a way of looking at RE, but I'm not a fan. But I'm not going to spend ages talking about it because that's the real nitty gritty. And also, I've already stuck my foot in my mouth. I'll probably have like 400 direct messages after this from RE teachers who've been doing it 5 times as long as I have, telling me why I'm wrong on everything. But I guess that's the risk you take, isn't it?
No, I think it all comes from like the confidence you're describing comes from your knowledge of the subject, doesn't it? And the person who is driving RE in the school, in the best case scenario, will have a similar amount of sort of belief in what they understand RE to be, and how that looks to them. You reckon? I think because I don't think you can defend your decisions, for instance, in a conversation with a parent, as you described, unless you've got that sort of really fundamental understanding.
Yeah, I think that's maybe a bit of a fantasy scenario, though, given the situation we're in. I mean, I don't mean to disparage anyone, and it's not disparaging at all. It's just a statement of fact that most RE leads don't come from the same position that I do in terms of confidence and prior knowledge. But that's not a bad thing because we're all learning, and hopefully, people who are RE leads don't just see that as a stepping stone from into deeper roles in the school. One of the probably worst things you can do for RE is have a different RE lead every year because that person that's seen as a stepping stone to English lead or maths lead. So I would beg schools to seek out people to be RE lead who want to do it for 3 or 4 years. Yeah, that's probably important.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair point. I'm happy to stand corrected on that one. Yeah, because I think you're right. I think the longer we're allowed to explore our interests in such a way, being RE coordinator for a couple of years, rather than thinking that you have to become maths coordinator or English coordinator to be a success in the school, it makes a big difference, I think.
But I think in a way, like primary benefits from a very flat management structure. So I think there's nothing to say that if a school really valued RE, I don't see why someone couldn't go from being RE lead for 5 years to being SLT. I don't see why there has to be an intermediate step. If RE is seen on the same level as other foundation subjects, and foundation subjects are seen as a serious part of the curriculum, then it should be a myth that you probably need that additional step of being English or maths coordinator. But in reality, I know that's not the case. Maybe part of being RE lead is making the case for your subject and being an advocate in a way that you don't have to do in other subjects.
So I think sticking with the listeners, what would you recommend to anyone wishing to develop their religious prowess, in terms of teaching, should read or engage with?
Unfortunately, I had a blog post about this, so I just went and found out what I wrote in the blog post. Very short introductions. Absolutely huge fan of these. The little books, they're about this big. Really on anything. It doesn't forget RE, science. There must be hundreds and hundreds of them. And some of them are incredibly specific, more so now than at the beginning. So literally any very short introduction, they have them for all the faiths that you're likely to teach, but also like the Reformation, Anglicanism, the Bible, the Quran, Muhammad. So you can get really down. They're like 150 pages. They're like A6 size. And you can dip in and out, and they're always written by experts. What else did I say? A book called A Little Religion of History by Richard Holloway is a really good narrative history of religion. Sorry, did I say A Little History of Religion? Yeah. So that is something that I've used in Key Stage 3 to just take text out of it. I'd probably do that in Upper Key Stage 2 if we were doing more of a reading-based approach to RE. And it's a really quite an entertaining read, and it covers a lot of different world religions, and it covers the basic stories of like Jesus and Muhammad and Siddhartha Gautama and Guru Nanak and all that. Karen Armstrong is a fantastic author who is basically covers this rare category of RE. I said there wouldn't really be an RE section in a bookshop. She probably would be the only author in it necessarily, because she writes across a number of religions. So she's written books on Buddha and Muhammad and Paul, but also on Islam and God across the Abrahamic faiths and violence in religion and things. So they're a bit more in depth. They're maybe like 400 pages, but they're worth reading. Textbooks, huge fan of textbooks, love textbooks, wish there were textbooks for primary RE. I've talked about this on Twitter and got some kickback saying that RE doesn't really lend itself to textbooks. Again, that's obviously something I disagree with. I think it very much does, in the same way that history and geography do. But Key Stage 3 textbooks, the Knowing Religion series by Collins and the horrible, awful RE pun, what are they called? Inspire, with the RE capitalized on Inspire. Please shoot me now. Yeah. Oh, that's one thing I should warn you about. If you're thinking about becoming an RE lead, you're going to have to get used to RE puns on every single corner, and it will make you cry. And I don't think any other subject has to put up with this, because you try making a pun out of PHSE. Yeah. So those textbooks, because I think there's always been this thing about you should be reading a key stage above where you are. So that's great, but there's nothing, I use GCSE textbooks quite a lot. And you can usually pick them up secondhand fairly cheaply, but make sure you're using high quality ones, because RE has changed a lot in the last 10 years. I do use some older ones. I use some from like maybe 20, 30 years ago, but you dig far enough back and you get to some terms where you're like, oh, I wouldn't use that term now. I wouldn't use that anglicized spelling of this Islamic term or something like that. So be careful with RE textbooks. NATRE. Yes, National Association of Teachers of RE. Join it. Get your school to pay for your membership, preferably. They publish a magazine every term, which has a section called Professional Reflections. Professional Reflections. Yes, great. Great joke. Very funny. Anyway, and that's sort of getting towards the quality of like the Historical Association now, in terms of like what's being written. You've got people like Richard Key, I don't know how to say his surname, but writing about disciplinary stuff. You've got all sorts of people in there writing about RE, which is great. There's a book called Reforming RE, which I don't agree with, and for me, it's got many authors. Some chapters I agree with, but a lot of it I don't. But I'm definitely going to recommend it because it's a real conversation starter. It's been really key to RE basically since it came out maybe 2 years ago, in informing a lot of conversations. And there's a great blog as well. I've obviously never been invited to write on that blog because of my fundamental disagreement with the idea of worldviews, but there are some amazing authors on that Reforming RE blog. It's a fantastic project. It's one of those things where I just admire the like rigorousness of it and how well written everything is, and I just fundamentally disagree with almost everything people have to say on the subject. So I'm definitely going to recommend that. 100 Ideas in RE by Andy Lewis. Andy Lewis is an amazing textbook writer, fantastic thinker on RE, and he wrote 100 Ideas for secondary RE, but you can pinch them all for primary. Yeah, brilliant. Love that book. And then finally, Make Every RE Lesson Count by Louise Hutton and Dawn Cox. Just came out in the last month, and it's a game changer for RE. That whole Make Every Lesson Count series is fantastic. There's obviously designed for secondary RE, but nick stuff from it. It's great. It's got all the stuff about theological, philosophical, sociological lenses in it, so it's worth buying it just for that. Sorry, that was almost like my Amazon wish list, wasn't it? That was one thing after another. So maybe don't read all of those, maybe just a few.
No, that's an absolute treasure chest of resources to go to. And to be honest, I'll be listening back and buying some of the the books for myself, thinking actually, yeah, that sounds really interesting. What I really liked was the point about reading stuff even though you disagreed with it. Because I always say, don't necessarily follow people you disagree with, because there's not much to be gained from the same circular arguments on social media, but definitely read to hear what the other arguments are, because you never know when you might change your mind. So I think that was
complete. I love that sentiment. I've never thought of that before, but it's so true. I don't follow many people I disagree with, because what can you do in 280 characters but fall out with people, block people, get upset on Twitter? I'm not really into that. Move past that point in my life now. But absolutely read stuff you disagree with. I mean, whether that's in RE or whatever it is in, I think it's worth doing. And obviously you're going to find out that what people write in a 150-page book is a lot more nuanced than what they say on Twitter. And you're going to find out a lot of your disagreements with people dissolve or become less, confrontational, less of a dichotomy. So I completely agree with that. It's absolutely crucial to every teacher to read and engage with the things they disagree with. But it doesn't mean you have to follow people you disagree with on Twitter. Also, there are just some people out there who are just bad actors, bad faith people who publish bad research. And, I think that's part of planting your flag as well, is admitting that not everyone is. Some people are just antagonists, and then there are antagonists on my side and there are antagonists on their side. It's not unique to, it's not like my guys are all the good guys and their guys are all the bad guys. But yeah, it's a minefield. I always feel such a double-edged sword saying to people, you should get on Edu Twitter. Ooh, I don't know.
Yeah, I think a healthy mute block relationship with Twitter is probably the best way. But I think
it's good. I find that having a list of words that you are muted, you can still see them if you choose to. I was reading something today and I was like, what word have I muted that is in this? And it had the word woke in it. And I muted the word woke because I just don't need to read people's opinions about how woke teachers are or how unwoke they are. So mute. My mute word list is probably like 200 words long at this point.
Yeah. In thinking deeply about primary mathematics, I even say I don't mind if you block me, because it's your mental health at the end of the day. You have to look back. If you're getting really stressed about what someone says on social media, then you're not getting the goodness, because there's so much goodness out there. Like all the people from season 1 I met on social media, and and my career is much richer for the fact that I sort of met them and talked about pedagogy and things.
There's no way I'd be even. I would still be maybe second in department in a secondary school. If it wasn't for Twitter, it's fine. But my career would be vastly, hugely, unrecognizably different if it wasn't for the 2 years I've spent on Edu Twitter. So it's good. But I'm also sort of like, what's that Joker thing? I was born in. You have only experienced Edu Twitter. I was born in. I've had a Twitter account since like 2008. So yeah, maybe that helps to navigate the intricacies of it.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with minefield. That's right.
Yeah.
So then, I suppose my next question comes in 2 parts. One we possibly discussed quite a bit, but it's sort of like the features of a high quality RE curriculum in your opinion, and how might schools bridge the gap between their ambition and the reality that they're currently experiencing?
Okay. I think the first part I can do quite quickly because we talked a fair bit about my idea of what high quality is. I just wanted to bring up very briefly an idea that I was developing a while ago. I never really came back to, of an inquiry model for RE that I think actually works in primary really well, and that's seeds, roots, and branches. So the idea of this is that seeds are the concepts that we plant fairly early on, year 1, year 2, but all the way through, actually, right up until year 13, we're constantly planting these new concepts in heads, and they get more complex as time goes on. But and concepts, we say concepts, but what does it really mean? Mary Myatt, who's a huge hero of mine, said, they are the intellectual architecture on which knowledge and insights can be pinned. And I really like that idea of intellectual architecture. So we might plant a seed like sacrifice or scripture or something like that. And then the roots are the representation of what that concept looks like intellectually. So that you could say that's the theology lens that we use. So things like scripture and theology and parables, myths and philosophy are all roots. And the more we extend those roots, the securer the tree will be. So, and we can keep going, and we can go off here and off there. And I like this idea of roots because you can constantly go deeper and more complex with roots. And then the branches are the more like sociological, historical, cultural elements of religion. So once we've grown that tree, we've buried those roots, what do the branches and leaves look like? So what does prayer mean for believers? How does it manifest in visual art? We do like a whole term on Christianity and visual art and a whole term on Islam and visual art. How does it manifest in architecture, in festivals? But I'm particularly interested in the question of how it manifests in social action. So religious things like Catholic social teaching, Islamic aid. We do a whole module on Islam and climate change and look at the Hajj and the impact of that and stewardship and ideas. So that's another example. So that's, for me, that's a curriculum model for RE, which I think leads to high quality RE. If you've got that idea of a concept, theological roots, and then sociological, cultural, historical, artistic expressions. Second question was about making sure that that you actually implement a high quality RE curriculum. Again, I'm going to be a bit radical here, and I'm just going to say start small and simple. Okay, so if you currently do not teach explicit RE, you are maybe going to look for half an hour in your curriculum a week. Maybe you're just going to look for half an hour a week for 3 of the 6 half terms in your first year, and you're going to claim that curriculum space. You're going to say, this is RE, religious education. If you want to call it something else, you can call it something else, but this is religious education. And in those slots, you're going to do year 1 Christianity, year 2 Islam, year 3 Buddhism, year 4 Judaism, year 5 Sikhism, year 6 Hinduism. And that's it. And if you don't revisit those things, that's a shame, but that's where you're going to work towards and grow towards. Okay, so you've got breadth and no depth whatsoever. And then what you do for the next few years is you build up that depth and you build up that revision and you build up that reviewing things. So you think about how you can maybe expand that half an hour to an hour, or you think about how you can teach it every half term, how you're going to implement that. But for my mind, it's better to even cut back on RE until you feel confident that you're delivering a high quality, distinct, explicit RE curriculum. I'm not precious about every school has to teach RE because it has this huge moral and social and cultural purpose. You know, that even bad RE is going to be improving our communities and making them more coherent and giving children this positive view of diversity. I'm fine. I'd rather not do RE than do bad RE. I mean, again, it's controversial. It's my own personal position, but sorry, that's what I believe. I think RE has like I said, I think I have a clarity of purpose behind RE, and for me personally, I'd rather that time was spent on history, or that time was spent on doing something weird like classics or Mandarin, than doing. I'm not going to give examples of bad RE because that will really land me in hot water, because I expect 90% of your listeners will say, but we do that. And like, I do it as well. Don't worry, I do it. You know, even I do bad RE. I'm not trying to say that I'm immune to it. But yeah, it's that. And then making sure that everything justifies itself on the curriculum. So everything you point to and you say it's linked to this, 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 and this. It's linked to this in other subjects. It's there because this is the seed concept that we've planted, and we're developing it from year 2, and we're developing it up to year 5. And like I say, the wall from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia behind you with all your links on it that you can understand and explain, so that everything justifies its place in the curriculum, and nothing stands alone. I think anything in RE stands alone. And I think if you've got stuff in your RE curriculum that does stand alone, like I say, maybe that module that you did for International Women's Day, that you're like, oh, nothing against International Women's Day, but you know, does that link into any of the other RE curriculum? Scrap it, or give it to PHSE, or give it to someone else. If you've got a random bit of like LGBT History Month that's been whacked into your RE curriculum, it's not RE, mate. And like, you know, it's important to me that kids get an education about LGBT issues, but that is PSHE, PHSE. I always say, I'm not going to go down that route. I always say PHSE because that's what it was when I was at school. Yeah, and I think that's, and seek help. Not like in a, you know, maybe you want to seek a mental health professional after you've been told that you're the RE lead. I mean, that's been helpful for me. But no, I mean, seek help from your trust. If you're in a trust, seek help from your local authority. Might still have an RE advisor. Join your NATRE local group, because you'll be surprised, there probably is one if you're not a member of it already. I have always, I love talking about RE, as you can probably tell. So DM me. I'm always happy to chat on Zoom with people about stuff and point people in the right direction. Like, there are amazing people on Twitter. If you look at a lady called Katie Gooch, she regularly posts in reply to people a whole list of primary RE people on Twitter. So seek some help with your curriculum, because there's not a book that I can recommend yet. That's just like a really simple, straightforward guide, in a way that some of the guides I've written for other curriculum areas exist.
Yeah, I think everything we're talking about is tying together nicely because, as you describe the way for a school that actually thinks, well, we need to improve our RE offering, just like your current school did a couple of years ago. And they need to set out an extended period of time and say, right, okay, we're going to improve. We're going to have a subject lead in there who's going to do it piece by piece. And then in a couple of years' time, we will have the product that we, the offering that we hope our kids have. So, I can see links between everything you're saying here. So then, and really nice point you've just finished on, because obviously recently, and the timing couldn't have been any better, because I think we were in the middle of a conversation and possibly the next day, John Kett announced that, and I'll make sure I get the name right, Powerful RE, a step-by-step guide to planning, implementing and teaching knowledge-rich primary RE will be published later in 2021. And every time someone talks about a book, I ask them the same question. Why does the world need this book?
Yes. I think, fortunately, I've got a really clear answer to that question, and that's because this book doesn't exist yet. There are a couple of guides to primary RE on the market, which, and I can't be clear enough about this because I think it's such a big qualifier to everything I say. I have a position in this debate in RE, right? I've taken this position of believing in academically rigorous, knowledge rich RE. The other books that are out there on the market take a different position to that. And it tends to be called creative RE, although one of the chapters in my book is about why we need to keep the creativity but leave the soft touch behind. But they do not, that's not my vision of RE, and I wouldn't recommend someone to read those books, although again, like you say, like I have read them because I like to read things I disagree with. So that's why it exists, because I went on Amazon and I searched primary RE, and I went on John Catt and I searched primary RE, and nothing came up. And often people never did this when I was a secondary teacher, because I think there's so many secondary RE, because of the way that specialism works in secondary, people message me all the time wanting to talk about primary RE. I love talking about primary RE, but I would love even more to be able to post a link to a book, be like, read this book. So I can do that a little bit with Make Every RE Lesson Count, but with the qualifier that it's for secondary, or with Andy Lewis's book with the qualifier that it's for secondary. And so I just got to the point where I was like, I just want to write the book that I wish existed. And so that's what I'm doing. And I'm not, I feel so I didn't necessarily know that John Catt were going to tweet that the book was coming. They did ask me beforehand, and I said it's fine. But my impression was that there was going to be a long period where I would be writing this book and putting feelers out about this book and kind of laying the ground for this book and telling everyone I possibly could in earshot that I am not an expert in primary RE, that I am not, okay, with a big capital NOT, not claiming a position of like unique expertise, that I have all the answers. The whole purpose of this book is like, already some of your guests have been annoyed by me because I've messaged them saying, I have a list of questions for you. I want to include a mini interview with you in the book, like Elliot Morgan talking about task design, right? Because he is amazing on task design. So I'm just going to steal his expertise and whack it in the book. Mary Meyer, stealing her expertise, whacking it in the book. Hundreds of, hopefully, people will have their expertise distilled and put through this frame of like how it relates to RE. That maybe is where my expertise lies, is in being able to parse like general ideas into the more specific idea of primary RE. And I guess I have the expertise. You can't see air quotes on the audio version. I'm doing air quotes. Watch the video version if you want to see me doing air quotes. The expertise of having actually written a year 1 to 6 curriculum, but also having made mistakes across the board, having gone to like a lot of it I've ended up teaching myself, because I teach all of our virtual school RE, and being like, oh, year 1 are doing what? I wrote this 6 weeks ago and I was an idiot. And like, so what can I say? I mean, I guess when you say, oh, I'm writing a book, you take a certain position of expertise, don't you? But I'm horrified by the idea that there are all these people out there seeing, oh, he's writing a book, 4 years. He's been a teacher for 4 years and he's writing a book. Really like massive, huge imposter syndrome about it. But like I say, you have to plant your flag. You have to do your thing. I've always wanted to write a book. That's a great reason to do it, because it's the book that I wish existed and I wish I could recommend to people. And I've written a couple of chapters. and it's okay. I'm just seeing it basically as, I have to write 21 blog posts, right? 21 blog posts with fully referenced, beautifully written, with people that I love and I think are incredibly intelligent and much more experienced and better thinkers than I am included in there. So that's why this book is coming, because I didn't. If anyone else over the last 6 months had told me, "Oh, I'm writing this book about primary RE," I'd be like, "Yes, thank God, finally!" And no one else has, so it fell on me. But yeah, it's not. I just wish I could have made the air quotes clearer. Does everyone know that I was doing air quotes when I was talking about expertise? I mean, like, it's just, I think it's come up particularly on Twitter this weekend at the end of half term. We're recording this at the end of February half term. And there's been this debate, as it were. Again, one of the things where I've added words to my muted list as a result of this, about people claiming positions of expertise, podcasts, being part of that. And so I'm super self-conscious, and that coincided with this book being announced. I'm super self-conscious that I'm still learning so much, and I don't want to. I don't know. I'm sure I know other people feel like this when they're writing, but I just feel it really intensely at the moment.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think even 10, 15 years down the line, you'll still feel the same way. And it was only through conversations with people like Shannon saying, just forget all that. And what Chris Such said to me, the only person who has to think the book is worthwhile is you, because you're the one who spent the time writing. If other people want to engage with it, then that's a bonus. And I think you've both set out your stall, and it's been pretty clear that you have a lot to give in this subject. And the model you've got, where you're going to draw in expertise from other people, sounds absolutely superb. So when I saw it was being when I saw it tweeted, I thought, yes, I'm interested in. But now I'm sold. I'm all like, yes, I cannot wait for this to happen. So you need to get those 21 blog posts written.
Yeah, I love the fact that they were so vague. They were like, coming in 2021, and I was like, oh, December the 31st, 2021. That's my deadline. So yeah.
Excellent. No, really looking forward to that. So your work has inspired many, and will continue to do so for a long time, I think. Where do you draw your sources of inspiration from?
I wrote lists, right? And I know I've done a lot of lists, and this is kind of boring, but I thought about just people who've been like really important to my journey, and so it kind of divided it into two categories, and those are people who have a clear vision. And I think even just assessing myself and how I've talked over the last however long it's been, I think you can see that I have a clear vision for what are full of self-doubt, full of questioning, full of wanting to learn, but I do have quite a clear vision of what I think RE is and what place it should take in the curriculum. And that's inspired by people like Michael Young talking about, so it's called Powerful RE, right? Because I'm totally stealing or borrowing or using whatever the correct parlance is, Michael Young's Powerful Knowledge, because it's one of the most, it just hit me like an absolute ton of bricks, because there was this dichotomy of like, trad is right wing and progressive is left wing. And if you have a trad, I can't see air quotes on the audio version, using air quotes, trad view of the world, then you must be right wing. You must have this view about culture and knowledge. Michael Young took that and just got rid of it. And thanks be to him for doing that. Mary Myatt, who I've mentioned several times, has a super clear idea of what high quality curriculum is. Absolute hero. Daniel Willingham just knows what education should look like. And again, his book was one I read at the same time as Daisy Christodoulou and Rosenshine, and just completely revolutionized my view of, I never had any interest in cognitive science before that. I still don't really now, but I understand it a little bit better. Tom Bennett is another one. People say, oh, he's not a teacher, he's not in the classroom, but he has a clear idea of what his idea of a behavior policy should be, and what his own. So people with clear visions who are not afraid to go and stick their neck out, put their head above the parapet, and advocate for them are hugely inspirational for me. And although you can see I'm like crippled with kind of like self-doubt and imposter syndrome, I just want to have that confidence being able to do that. And I guess you have to have a certain not caring what other people think that I don't yet possess. And then on the other hand, are people just feet on the ground in classrooms, but taking the time to share their experiences, to be humble, to be knowledgeable, to be unashamedly open with the mistakes they've made. And that's one of the great things about this podcast, I think, is that people talk about the mistakes they made. And that's the most entertaining bit, right? Apart from when you do the tier lists, when people are talking about the mistakes they made, that is my favorite bit. And then people, yeah. So I think like people who've been on the podcast, like Neil and Elliot and Shannon and Lloyd and everyone who was on the last season of the podcast, it's difficult almost to put like I don't mean to like be really like suck uppy, but this listening to the last season of this podcast had a pretty similar effect for me in primary as reading those papers and those books did for me in secondary. You know, it really made me think very differently. It also released me from a huge amount of guilt about taking time at weekends and evenings to do CPD and stuff. I'm very similar to Neil when he had his really long commute. Like I commute from Southend to South London, 90 minutes every day on a train, and I use that time to like read and listen to podcasts and stuff. I always felt really guilty about it because I was like, I should be resting. Where's my mental health? Where's my work-life balance? So it released me from that. So I'm super glad about that. Other people like Andy Lewis, Dawn Cox, Louise Hutton, who've just written amazing books about RE, but just do it in their everyday life. I think Dawn Cox has been amazing this week, probably coming from a similar position of me, having to make explicitly clear on Twitter that she didn't do everything that was in her book, that she is not her RE curriculum is not perfect at her school, that the way that she teaches is not perfect because teaching is always a compromise. And I'm writing this book on primary curriculum. I can tell you there's stuff in there that I'm advocating for that I don't know how I would implement in my very specific context. For example, we only do half an hour a week of RE. And so doing extended writing, it's not where I want it to be, right? Or not doing extended writing or whatever that debate is. So there's that, and that honesty and that acknowledgement about where things are. And also on that with Mark Enzer and Zoe Enzer as well, because they're incredible. And Mark is a book writing machine. It seems like every day I get a post and it's one of Mark's books that I've pre-ordered. And I always say to him, like, I'm just really glad that it comes direct from the publisher and it's not signed, because I think the copies he hasn't signed are actually worth more. They're rarer because, you know, bless him, Mark. But he's just, like I say, he's just a book writing machine, and he just has this way of like taking ideas and putting them into print and being really open about it. And you're like, but you also have a proper job and like a life and a, you know, and Zoe's the same. They're just really generous with their knowledge. And I guess similarly to the people in the first list, like they take a position and they're happy to talk about why they got to that place. So that's my lists. Those are my lists. I could go on and on. I could just give you hundreds of people who are inspirational, but they're my chosen ones.
Nice, that's superb. Yeah, whenever I ask people to talk about who they are and where they're from, I had no idea. I think it was the second recording I'd done was with Neil, and he just totally gave me his whole background, and I was like, "Whoa, this is a much deeper question than I'd ever imagined it." So I totally know where you're coming from, you know, because
yeah,
it is
there's
almost
a big similarity between that section of your podcast and when you go to church and people give you testimonials about their faith. It's almost uncanny how similar it is. People talking about their faith journeys and people talking about their school journeys is like the same. And at the end of whenever you do either, you always feel deeply self-indulgent. But when you listen to other people's, you feel really interested in it because you see yourself reflected and things like that. So yeah.
nice. I had no idea how, you know, the impact that was having. That's fantastic. And so I suppose the last one before we move on to the tier list, is there any final advice you'd give for teachers who are now feeling energized and ready to up their religious education game?
You'll be able to pre-order my, no, I'm joking. I don't know when you'll be able to pre-order my book, when it's written, I assume. No, I've written down 3 things. Read as much as you can, however much you get time for. Obviously I read a fair bit, but you know, maybe it's just a blog post a month, whatever. Read stuff. Make mistakes. Like, you will make mistakes. It's putting your stake in the ground is always going to lead to mistakes because you don't know everything. You can't predict the future. So acknowledge that you're going to make mistakes in creating a curriculum. Don't see a curriculum as a stone object that you will have to like really make effort to chisel away at, but see curriculum as something that's like fluid and changeable, especially if you're implementing a new curriculum or you're adapting a curriculum. Don't worry about making mistakes with it and fix them. Once you've acknowledged that you've made mistakes, like, see it as a long-term thing and try and fix those mistakes. Like, you can change things, you know. Like I say, I feel a little bit now like I've done this year 1 to 6 curriculum, like it's a bit immutable, but actually that frees up time in my job as an RE lead, that I'm now not having to sit down and make PowerPoints and booklets and lesson plans, that I can do some of this fixing and fiddling, which I'm quite looking forward to, really. So yeah, and make connections with people as well. Like, if you're not on Twitter, am I really going to go on record as saying get on Twitter, as if that's be aware of what Twitter is like? No, do get on Twitter. Twitter's absolutely, I wouldn't be where I would be now if it weren't for Twitter. Join NatTray and a local group and make connections. And people who are in multi-academy trusts as well should be talking about RE across those trusts. That's just what we're starting to do now. I'm in a trust with 3 other primary schools and 2 secondary schools, and I'm really looking forward to the next year when we're going to vamp up our curriculum work across the trust. So yeah, that's my advice for people who want to go and do it. Just, I guess, to distill it, read about it, just do it, and then fix the mistakes afterwards. That would be my advice.
That's solid, perfect. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's been absolutely fascinating from start to finish, and I know that people are going to feel really really energized in terms of their RE teaching. I know I wish I could teach it tomorrow, you know, just based on this.
I literally am teaching it tomorrow, so recorded as it will be, but yeah.
Awesome. But yeah, thank you very much.
No, thank you. And can I just say, like, please just DM me on Twitter, like, or just message me on Twitter, whoever is listening to this that wants to talk about primary RE. And I'll happily, I've done over half term, I've done maybe 5 or 6 Zoom chats with people, and just maybe like half an hour just to talk about their curriculum and stuff like that. I love it. It's as good for me as it is for them. And it's something I'm trying to develop professionally as well. It's like helping other schools and things. So yeah, that's kind of a plea from me, I guess. If you're wanting to talk about it, then I want to talk about it as well. So